Another episode here of Getting There with Goz, where we talk about the career journeys of athletes, media members, coaches, business owners, and more. And we have a two-part episode here. We're going to talk to our guy, Fansided Zone Matt Verderame, national NFL reporter. Part one, we're going to talk about Matt's career, an interesting journey he's had. And then I'm going to force Matt to stick around for a little bit longer so we can break down this year's NFL draft. Nobody better to do it with than an actual NFL reporter who does this for a living. But let's do part one. So, Matt, let's start at the beginning, man. Take us through a young Matt Verderame, 6, 7, 8 years old. Where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be as a kid? And was it the same job you wanted to have when you were 18 years old?
So I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in Livingston Manor, New York, which is a town of like 2,000 people. It's 100 miles north of Manhattan. So we would drive into Yankee Stadium and go to games. It'd take like, an hour and 45 minutes to get there. And you think, whenever I tell people I'm from New York, they're like, "Oh, which borough?" Like, no, it's not quite. So I grew up in the Catskill Mountains. Now, to get an idea of how small that is, put it in perspective, I graduated with 43 kids, and that was one of the bigger classes. Our building was K through 12, and for high school, you just went upstairs. Like when they had prom, it was the entire high school went. Wow. You just 9 through 12, man. And if you were in 8th grade and you got invited by a high schooler, you could go. So that was
insane.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the way it was. So very small. Loved growing up there. But yeah, it was always a town that I kind of figured at some point in my life I would move out and try to make my own way. But I go back every year. My parents still live there. It's great. I mean, look, if you're a nature person, it's incredible. But yeah, I mean, look, the town next to us, by the way, as a side note, graduated 8, I think, last year. So yeah, that's right. Couldn't field the football team. Had to merge with us.
Wow.
So I did grow up there. I also, for a year and a half, because my dad's job, I spent down in outside Washington, D.C., which is cool. Just cool. Totally different. More, suburban type living. But yeah, so in any event, beyond that, growing up, I just always knew I wanted to do something in sports. I knew from an early age that I was not going to be a professional athlete. I thought maybe I could play college hockey. And I think if I really had just said that's what I want to do, I think I probably could have as like a walk-on. But I just knew going to college, I'm like, well, I'm not going pro, so I probably should focus on like other aspects of my life. I wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster. That's why I went to SUNY Oswego in upstate New York, and that's where, or I guess central New York, and that's what I really wanted to do. I went for my mass communications degree. I called the hockey games for 4 years, and they won the national championship my freshman year, so that was a lot of fun, and it was the first one they'd won in the school's history. I believe to date, still the only one. That was what I wanted to do, and then life kind of just takes over, and things happen, and one weird twist leads to another, and now I report on the NFL. But I wouldn't change it. If you had told 5-year-old me that I get to do this, I would have been thrilled.
Yeah, that decision to go to Oswego, I want to get your take on that because we've had fellow Oswego alumni like yourself on this podcast, your pal Brady Farkas, Alicia Dario, Josh Murray, and I've asked all of them the same question of why they decided to go to Oswego. I'm curious if your answer fits their same reason. Why did you eventually decide on Oswego?
Because I was too broke to go to Syracuse.
4 for 4. 4 for 4. Everybody said the same thing.
So I always wanted to go to Syracuse, St. John's as a kid. Syracuse was a school that I always had circled because of their communications program. But then I'm a St. John's basketball fan. I love New York City. They have a great communications program. So I didn't even apply to Syracuse because my parents were like, yeah, right. So I said, okay, so we'll skip that. I applied to Hofstra. I applied to St. John's. And I applied to Oswego. I got into all of them. Took a visit to Hofstra. And nothing against Hofstra. I love Long Island. I just didn't feel like it was for me. Then I visited Oswego. And I went on a day in late March, which if you've ever been to Oswego, New York, by all rights, it should have been 20 degrees with like a negative 784 wind chill. And it was gorgeous. 70 degrees, wasn't a breath of wind. And had a great visit. went into the TV station, talked to a bunch of upperclassmen there, got the vibe that I could kind of get involved right away. I saw that as a big advantage. And then also, I loved the town. We went to a restaurant that I remember my parents and I went to a place called the Press Box, and it was an awesome place. I could see myself going there a lot when I was in school, which I ended up doing. And I just fell in love with it. And it was like a third of the price of Syracuse. And I thought it was prettier. I mean, if you've ever been to the campus in Oswego, it is right, and I mean right on Lake Ontario. So you get this beautiful sunset every night, and you have the beach, and you have ice cream, Bev's, this ice cream place right on the water. And I just, Oswego had such a great reputation as a school for broadcasting and for journalism that I felt like this is a great fit. It felt like home when I went there, and I loved it. I loved it. So many people end up transferring or whatever out of whatever school they choose. I never had a second thought once I committed there, and I love being a Laker.
You mentioned you want to do the play-by-play round. When you step on campus as a freshman, what do you start getting into? Are you doing play-by-play? Are you writing? What are some of the opportunities that are offered to you? What do you take advantage of?
So I never wrote at all. I wrote for my high school newspaper, which, as you can guess from what I just said, is not that hard to do. If you literally can write a sentence, you're in. But no, I didn't write at all. In college, I wrote for fun. Like if I was inspired by something, I think I wrote once about like Ken Griffey's, I think it was his 500th to 600th home run. And I just saved it as a Word document, but that was it. Like I never did anything with it. I worked at WTOP. It's just WTOP 10, which is a TV station up there, the local student-run TV station. And my freshman year, I worked as an analyst during the intermissions. So I would come on, and it was me and like two other people, and we would just break it down. I didn't become the play-by-play guy until my junior year. But I did intermission work the first couple of years. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it. I remember after they won the national title, I got to get the players and a few of the players and the coach to sit down, and we did like an hour-long special with me interviewing them in the locker room. I still have that on a tape somewhere in the house. But that was really, kind of how it started. I knew that I just wanted to talk sports and be in front of a camera. I never had any fear of public speaking. And so that was kind of my foray into it. I'll never forget it. I had not my freshman year, but in my latter years, my junior and senior years, I had a teacher there by the name of Ron Grafe, who for years and years and years was a TV anchor in Syracuse who went by Ron Hastings. And he was an older guy, very blunt, very to the point, but I loved him. He was a teacher who became like my de facto advisor. He wasn't actually my advisor, but he turned into one. And he would sit there, and I guess he saw something in me. He was like, look, I'm going to watch all your broadcasts. I'm going to grade you during the broadcast. And then when you come back on Monday, we're going to sit in my office, and I'm going to go over what you're good at. So the first time he did it, I had a very high opinion of myself. And I thought that I was great, right? Like I thought I nailed it. And he's like, okay, here's what I think. And he went over like 3 or 4 like really like good points or whatever you want to call them. It's like, here's why you suck. And then ripped into like 15 different things, right? But I loved him for it because it made me better. And even though I never ended up going into television, although I do some TV spots now and then, he made me better. And he made me realize that to get better, you have to identify the things you're not good at rather than the things that you think you are good at. And his critique was something that it always worked for me. But it definitely my freshman year, man, I just was in an ugly pinstripe suit and doing intermission work. And it was fun. It was a thrill.
When we're taping this part of the interview, by the way, just for a reference point for people who are listening, there is some stuff going on at Oswego at this point with WTOP and a lot of the students. I would ask your opinion on that, but I don't think it's fair because nothing's really been decided yet. So just because of time,
I've been involved with it behind the scenes.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
We're in a Twitter chat group now. It's about 40 deep, DM wise. Yeah, this essay is talking about budgetary cuts and whatnot. You're right. Nothing has been decided. They were going to have a meeting earlier this week, but then they got flooded with so many different people getting involved that they moved it back. Look, I don't know how it's going to play out. I'll just say this. there are a lot of people that go to Oswego to be a part of that TV station. I'm one of them. So if you're the school that prides itself on being a broadcasting school, and let's be real now, like there are some other very good majors in that school, but that is a number one. Like if you go there, that's probably why you're going there more than any other reason. Like not a great idea not to fund the TV station. I mean, just look around for people who aren't aware. Al Roker went to Oswego. Steve Levy went to Oswego. Linda Cohn went to Oswego. I mean, there are legions of people who have come out of Oswego who went to that communications program who have gone on to be very successful. So if I'm the school, like I'm figuring out how to fund the TV station and the radio station. That is not that big of a deal. My God, they've had so many people donate. I mean, Steve Levy donated money for the press box in the hockey arena. Al Roker donated money for the TV studio there. I would be very disappointed in my alma mater if they can't figure that out.
Well, your alma mater is Oswego, and eventually you do have to leave the campus. As much fun as you've had, and maybe in a future podcast we'll tell stories, because during Radio Row, that was one of my favorite traditions to get you, Brady, and myself going about old college stories. We'll save that for a future podcast, but you have to enter the real world. What is your first job out of college? Is it in sports like you hope? And I see you shaking your head. So is it not in sports? What happens?
My road is bizarre. So I get out of college. I was 21. I graduated a semester early. I had done some internship work. So I guess that's where I should start. So between the end of my junior year and the start of my senior year, which I graduated in December, so it was only one semester. I worked for the Hudson Valley Renegades, which, guys, you might know is a short season single A affiliate for the Rays. And I was, I was basically just a mule, just a lackey, but I also did some play-by-play for them. And I enjoyed it. But, I was doing it as an unpaid internship, got out, had great experience, got good marks for it. And then finished up school, December of 2009, got out, and I wrote a letter to, I believe, every major sports franchise in the country. Like, hey, I'd like to work for you, just naively. And most of them didn't get back to me. Some did, basically saying, thanks for your interest. We have no interest in hiring you, which is fine. I still have those letters. I'll never get rid of them. And it served as motivation early on. Like, I'll show you. I'll prove you wrong. And I think that was something that was good for me, was not to get a job right away, because I was already full of myself enough. But I think, look, so I got out of school and I took a job as a vendor in supermarkets, stocking shelves, and in some cases cleaning off the shelves, taking everything off the shelves, cleaning the shelves, and I'm talking like dirty metal shelves at like ShopRite. That was pretty much what I did. I remember being thrilled when they gave me a raise to like $11 an hour. That's what I did to just pay my bills. And on the side, so but while I was doing that, my first break was I got a job at SB Nation. I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and I was writing just for nothing, just as a fan, just fan posts on Arrowhead Pride, which is a Chiefs blog. And the guy who ran the site at the time, Joel Thorman, who now runs their entire NFL division, he noticed them, and he would put them on the front page sometimes. And one day, they had an opening. He's like, look, man, I'll pay you $200 a month if you want to write like 5 times a week. Actually, it was $100. At first, it was nothing. Then it was $100. So I was like, yeah, what the hell? Is you sure? Right? So I started doing that. Then it became like $200. And then I was like, all right, well, if I can do this, like maybe I'm decent enough to write on their news desk for the main website. So I started I applied for that, the 20-hour-a-week position. And they said, look, we can't choose between you and one other guy. Would you split it at 10 hours a week? Like, okay. Sure, what the hell, right? It's a start. Turns out the other guy was Field Yates. So Field Yates and I split a job opening at SB Nation. It's a true story. He's a good guy. So got in there, man. Ended up getting it up to like 24 hours a week. And then, it was funny. They ended up making some cuts, and they cut me down to like half that time. And they told me, they're like, look, your longer form analysis is really good, but like, we need you to write live streams. And you suck at them because you don't care. You're so lazy. And it was true. I was awful with them. And I was like, oh, that sucks. That's, whatever. That's crap. But looking back, like now having worked at Fansided for 6 years and knowing how the business works, like, yeah, they were totally right. But I just was like, well, that's BS. Like, just give me a column to write.
Just real quick, just to pause right there for somebody who doesn't know. Live stream means you're tweeting during the action of a game?
No, live stream is like literally me writing like a 300-word post. Like, this is when this game's going to be played.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's just like for SEO purposes on Google, just like search it, but they do a lot of traffic. So I just hated them. So I was like, this is crap. Why am I writing this? Like, I'm more talented than this, which I wasn't at the time, by the way, but I thought I was. Which has been a theme in my career, at least until recently, I hope. But so I did that while I was still working at Arrowhead Pride. And then I got my real break into the business. And this actually includes our friend Brady Farkas. So his dad, Tim Farkas, who's a longtime editor at a million different high-end newspapers in the country, Seattle Times, Orange County Register. He was working for the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, a tiny, tiny town in Massachusetts. A guy who was a sports writer there had to go on a medical leave for 4 months. He needed his leg amputated because he had diabetes. Okay. So they're looking to fill this position. And Brady told me about it. Actually, excuse me. Brady told his dad, hey, Matt is somebody who you should talk to. I've seen him right on the side. He's pretty good. So his dad reached out to me. I expressed interest right away. I'm like, yeah, I'd absolutely love to do it. He's like, it's $15 an hour, which to me was like getting rich. So I was like, that's incredible. Like, absolutely. I'll do anything. What do you want me to do? He's like, well, I don't want you to send me anything you've already done. Here's a story. There's this kid, Paul Procopio, over at Williams College. He's a good baseball player. I want you to write a feature on him. You have 48 hours. And that was it. I had no idea how the hell to get in touch with Paul Procopio, right? I still don't even remember how this ended up working out, but I just started calling people at Williams College. Like, I called any number I could find. I ended up getting his buddy, who was like, yeah, he's sitting right next to me. Here, talk to him. I wrote the story. It was awful. I didn't know what a lead was. I had no pros. I did the best I could. And Tim Farkas ended up giving me the opportunity, large, I'm sure, because I was friends with his son, but also because he was like, look, you just wanted it so bad. I figured you'd get better at it. I lived in Pittsfield for 4 months at a Ramada Inn. And I poured myself into it. It was girls' high school basketball mostly. And at first, I kind of was like, oh, who cares? It's high school basketball. But then I was like, you know what? Like, for these kids, like, they really care. And if they're going to care, then you have to care. You have to give it everything you have just as much as they do. And that was kind of where my career started to change. I knew that my job was going to end after 4 months. But when the 4 months ended, they fought really hard with the publishing company to create a position to hire me. And so it was kind of at that point, I was like, well, if they're going to do that, like, I've got to at least have some modicum of talent. And from there, I went back to SB Nation for a few months. I ended up getting hired at the Binghamton Press and Sun Bulletin, which is a mid-sized paper in New York. I became the beat writer for the AHL Binghamton Senators. I worked there for a year and a half. And then I did what everybody dreams of doing. I told can I swear on this podcast?
Yes, yeah.
I told my boss to go fuck himself, literally, on Easter Sunday. And I quit. I hated him. And to this day, I think I was actually right in this one. He was unfair. He just, for whatever the reason, he didn't like me, which is fine. Like, many people don't like me. He had every right not to like me. But I was splitting the beat with who was actually a roommate of mine, a very good friend of mine, Matt Weinstein, who did a great job. But we would rotate home games. And so we got to the playoffs, and he gave Weinstein all the home games, and I didn't get to do any of them. And I was pissed. I was like, look, like, we've been rotating all year. I'm like, if you want to go, I think there were 3 home games in the series. I'm like, look, Matt's a senior writer compared to me, absolutely deserves 2 of them. Like, I should be getting 1 of these games. No. I was like, you know what, man, fuck you. I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go on to do something with my career, and I'm going to jam it down your throat. And I remember, and he was like, if you quit this job, you'll never get another job in journalism. I was like, okay, we'll see. And I walked out. And the next day he ended up calling me back. He's like, look, I love the fire you showed. I'd really like you to reconsider. And I was like, absolutely not. You can go fuck yourself. I'm never coming back, ever. Take all the shit in my desk and throw it in a dumpster. I don't care. I'm never coming back. I was like, you don't think I'll get a job in journalism? Okay. And that was 10 years ago. I left at 22 years old. I had no job prospects, but I hated them. And I was just bound and determined, like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to prove you wrong. And honestly, it was a decade ago. It still is like one of my main motivating factors every day when I go to work.
I'm getting fired up right now. Like I actually have, can't really see it on the side, but like I get the hair standing up because I can feel the passion for you. And so many people, hopefully listening, have gone through something similar, whether it's their career in sports journalism or media or radio or television or something like that. That motivating factor will linger there forever. And athletes have that happen all the time. You're not good enough to get on the field. You're not big enough. All that stuff happens.
Right.
I just don't want to gloss over one quick thing you said there. That is really important, especially for younger listeners. That girls' basketball beat that you were on, you saw that switch happen where you treated that team and that reporting with respect. That I think is great advice for young writers, especially that if you put a half-ass effort into it, your product might look like that. But when you treat it like it is the biggest deal there is, you will see your work improve. I want to get back to that ball story real quick, but I think we need to just offer that advice too about that change in your career.
No question, man. I think that was a turning point because, first couple games, I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to cover girls' high school basketball or boys' high school basketball for that matter. But then I remember Lee High School basketball girls, they're like an institution. They win every year. And they lost the game. And a couple of the girls were just sobbing. I said, you know what, man? Like, you need to care as much as these girls care. Like, look at these girls. Look how much they care. Like, why don't you care that much? You work for $15 an hour at a small newspaper. Like, you're never going anywhere. And you know what? I had so much support. He probably would never remember me, but Richard Lords was a hard scrabble copy editor at the Berkshire Eagle back then, and he had been through the wars with Tim Farkas, different newspapers. God bless him, man. He sat with me every night. This is how you write a lead. This is what a lead is. This is what a nut graph is, which is all your information that you should have in the second graph. This is a pyramid idea, where you start with the most important information and work your way down. I didn't know I never took a writing class. I never got to school for any of that. I didn't go to J school. I didn't go to any of those types of things. So for me, like he could have easily just been like, you're going to be here for 4 months. Who cares? He sat with me all the time. It's something I've never forgotten. Like he had such an impact on my career that I'm sure he has no idea he even worked with me, but he did. And I had so many people like that. I mean, that Binghamton newsroom I worked in, Mike Mangan was a guy who had been there for 25 years, and he's retired now, but he was somebody who worked with me. He sat across me all the time, helped me out all the time. Lynn Worthy, who sat right next to me, he's now the beat writer for the Kansas City Royals at the Kansas City Star, and was the Chiefs beat writer for a year before that. We had a lot of people come out of that newsroom and end up doing okay for themselves. It was a great environment to work in, and I think that's a big part of it. Look, you're naive in life if you think that any of the success you had is not also because of people around you. I had a lot of support, not only from my family and friends, but from people I worked with. And so when I got out of Binghamton, I did a million things, man. I'm still working at SB Nation part-time. I wrote for Awful Announcing. I wrote for that company's football site. I believe it's called Any Given Sunday. I wrote at Betting Sports, which I still do actually every day as an aside. I wrote that into my Fansided contract because I needed the extra money at the time. And now I don't really need the extra money, but I just do it because they gave me an opportunity years ago, and I just want to keep doing it. But yeah, man, I mean, it was just a weird career. Like I went back to stocking shelves after that Binghamton thing. I mean, this took, man, I didn't get my Fansided job till I was 25. So this was years of like grinding and working stocking shelves. I mean, there were a few times I thought about becoming a police officer. That was what I would have done probably if I didn't write. And then right before I got my Fansided job, I actually went back to school to become a high school history teacher because I just thought I was never going to be able to make it. But I loved writing so much, I didn't want to give up on it, so I kept doing it. And on the same day that I got offered into the master's program at Oswego to go to be a high school teacher, I got an offer full-time from Fansided.
Ooh, before you tell that story, I want to get to that because that was going to be the next question. I just want to go back a little bit because you mentioned that job situation where basically all you do to your boss, you tell them off. All you needed was a stone cold stunner and some beer, and you would have looked like Steve Austin or Vince McMahon. You basically went that far. Would you have done that same thing? Right. But would you have done that same thing in your early 30s when you were 22? Because 22, like we just felt the emotion about that. Okay, so explain that to people why. If you were 30, you're not going to do that same thing when you're 22. Or you might have told yourself something younger, hey, don't do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, a few reasons. So one is, when you're 30, at least in my situation, you have a mortgage and a family. Like my wife would have thrown me out of a window if I had done that, right?
Right.
I was 22, I had no responsibilities, and I think this is important to note too. I was very lucky growing up. Like my family was absolutely just blue collar, middle class. I mean, no frills. But my dad's dream was to put me through college. So I didn't have the student loans that a lot of people do. And that has to be said. I think, sometimes people like to bury that if that's their situation because it makes them like they're privileged. I was privileged. I absolutely was. I didn't have to pay. Now, I paid every other bill I had and everything, but I didn't. That was my dad. My dad had to drop out of college when he was younger. And so nobody in my family on that side had ever graduated from college. And my dad's dream for me was you're going to school and I will pay for it. And that's something that I will pay forward with my kids. Because we have a daughter, Maisie, who's 3.5, and we're already talking about how to put her through school. My wife was just pregnant with our second child, the son, Ben, who was going to be our second to last child, who we were going to put through school, but unfortunately last week was stillborn early. But
we're thinking about you, man. Prayers to your family for that, man.
Thanks. He's, hey, listen, he's at peace. But yeah, listen. So we'll I'm sure try to have another child here. My point is, we're gonna pay that forward. But I also had the luxury of leaving a job. If I was paying student loans, I don't know if I could have done that, but I did it because I didn't have the burden of student loans. I knew that if I have to go back to my parents at 22 and reset for 6 months, I can do it. That was something that I was really fortunate to do. But for me, like I said, I quit. I moved around. I did a million different things, and then I got lucky. Look, I got my job at Fansided because I saw somebody tweet out, hey, they're looking for somebody to run Arrowhead Addict, which is their chief site. And I was getting ready to go back to Oswego to finish my master's degree. I said, well, what the hell? I'll just do that. I'll make 20 grand out of that easy. I'm a Chiefs fan anyway. I love to write. I applied, and they got back to me, and they're like, listen, how would you feel about just running our NFL division full time? Like, they're like, the guy we had to move on from, and we know your work because the people who founded Fansided were all Chiefs fans. So they'd all read my stuff for years at Arrowhead Pride. If I'm not a Chiefs fan in New York, this career never happens. Ever. Ever. Not in a million years. Joel Thorman at SB Nation ran the NFL division. He could pull strings to get me on the desk. He's a Chief fan. And then I went to Fansided where I worked under Patrick Allen, who's a Chiefs fan. I worked under Zach and Adam Best, who founded the company, the Chiefs fans. So they'd read all my stuff. I mean, if my dad, the reason I'm a Chiefs fan is that my dad wanted them to win in Super Bowl IV. It was the first football game he ever watched. All his friends were Vikings, rooting for the Vikings. He was contrarian. The Chiefs won. If the Vikings win that game, I'm not sitting here because my dad, I'm sure, would have just went rooted for the Jets or something. Well, they didn't win. The Chiefs won. And so here I am.
Amazing. Like the destiny that took you to this spot.
Right.
One other thing, though, when you're talking about the Chiefs situation, it feels like the world itself from that early 2010 decade, and we're talking about online websites and opportunities, and what 2021 and maybe the future looks like. Do you think how that situation came through for you could still happen for seniors who are graduating college? Do you still feel like that is the path? Because, again, whether it's radio, television, writing, all these mediums have changed over the last decade in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Look, I think I firmly believe that talent and hard work will rise to the top, always, whatever medium you're in. But I saw a saying once in journalism and in sports writing, there's always going to be 100 people coming for the same job. You just have to be stubborn enough that you're the last person that still wants it. And I've always kind of believed that. Like, I think, if you're coming out of college now, yes, although the problem now is it's so much more saturated, I think, than it was when I came out of school. Not to say that there weren't a lot, but Fansided was in its infancy when I first came out. Like, it was really Bleacher Report, SB Nation, and I was lucky enough to hook into SB Nation at a time when the company was really exploding, and I worked for our biggest blog. So I got exposure that a lot of people wouldn't have got. Like, I remember the first time somebody was like, hey, you want to come on the radio? I was like, what? Like, you want me to come on the radio? I was terrified. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll do it, but I'm horrified. Now, I mean, we do spots all the time on the radio. I've gone on, obviously you and a million times. I didn't think twice about it, but at the time I was horrified. And then taking over at Fansided, Fansided, I took over the NFL section April 2015. So I've been there for 6 years now. And I remember, man, I moved to Chicago for the job, sight unseen. I'd never been to Chicago. My boss, Patrick Allen, got me an apartment there. In the first couple of years, we went through different acquisitions, and I loved the people I worked with, but it was like, man, are we going to make it? I mean, we're in an office of 5 people. Like, there's not a whole lot. But as time went on, they invested the right way. They never took outside money. They always poured their profits back into the company. And now I think we're third in ComScore in the United States for sports. And we were bought by Minute Media a year and a half ago, and they've been unbelievable. They've put us on an incredible trajectory, and I love working with them. In fact, I mentioned what happened to my son a week ago. They sent me like this massive flower arrangement. I don't even know, no idea how any of them even knew outside of like the immediate people I work with, but they did. It just goes to show the people I work for. But in any event, I know we're hitting up against a half hour, so I'll kind of wrap it. But I think the biggest thing that happened in my career, of all the things, and I mentioned a lot of turning points, was working with Jason Cole. Jason Cole, who, if people don't know, he worked as a Dolphins beat writer for many years and then became a Yahoo national writer. He did some Bleacher Report stuff. He became our editor-in-chief. He took over before the 2018 NFL season. And we only worked together for about a year and a half. He and Fansided, they moved their separate ways, just had differences in the way they wanted to go about things. But Jason and I remained very, very good friends to this day. And I went from being a writer to a reporter because he was like, look, nobody cares about your opinion unless you can back it up with people in the league. Like, you need to get sources. And I said, my guy, I have no idea how the hell do I do that? And he's like, I want you to just cold call agents, and I want you to cold email GMs and personnel directors and introduce yourselves to them. And that's how we're going to start this. And I'll help you a little bit, but this is how this is going to happen. I can't tell you how many hours I spent in the Fansided office literally calling up agents being like, hi, I'm Matt Verderame, and I'm the NFL reporter over at Fansided. And most of them were nice and cordial enough. I had a few guys be like, who the fuck, what? I'm like, and the funny thing is, one of the guys who really laid into me now, we're really good friends. Like, he's one of my best sources. But it was really like harrowing at first. I was like, I have no clue how to do it. Now I can't imagine writing a column without reaching out to 4 or 5 people in the league. But at the time, it was totally different. It's like, I want you to break news. If you don't break news, you're worthless to me. You have to break news. Like, okay. And I think my best advice to anyone listening to this who wants to go in a career like this, listen, you have to be able to fight through the fear and just have a willingness to just say, fine. But that's fine. I'll do it. What is the worst somebody's going to do? Mock me, say no, screw them. And Jason gave me the confidence to do that, and I'll forever love him for that. Like, he would not accept that good enough was good enough, and he made me so much better as a writer and then as a reporter. And he helped us get credentialed to the Super Bowl. I covered my first Super Bowl sitting next to him, which is fitting. We covered the Pats and the Rams. And then next year, I was up in the stadium for the Chiefs and in the Niners, and it would have been there last year except for COVID, but changed my whole career. I owe everything about being a reporter to Jason, and there's no doubt about that.
I hope you listening feel the passion like I do right now talking to Matt. He's covered everything we need when it talks to advice in the careers and finding those motivating factors and mentors and everything else. Now, I was already excited to get to the NFL draft content. Now, after that conversation, let's get into it. We're just going to reset here quickly. We're going to preview the 2021 NFL draft. We'll talk about certain teams of interest in the region and some players. So I'm going to give you a few minutes of break here. And we're going to go. Thank you for spending the time with us, man. Appreciate you sharing all those stories. And let's talk some NFL draft here in a second.
Let's do it.